Love you. Constantly amazing how this has stuck around. You know, once it gets in your blood, it has a tendency to hang around. All right. A lot of things I want to talk about. The CDC's report of this little-known virus with no vaccine spreading in the U.S. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the what the Senate is doing now to break up major meatpacking companies. I think that's kind of interesting. 56% of Americans now believe the vaccines cause mass deaths. What was once accepted or believed to be a conspiracy theory is now believed, according to a Rasmussen report. 56% of Americans, because every American now knows somebody who's been hurt or killed by these vaccines. And then there is this, interestingly enough, a top Brown University cancer researcher published his findings on COVID vaccines, and then came the attacks. So interestingly enough, and then I want to eventually get to Alzheimer's, because I've had some patients ask me some questions about that. In fact, the latest predictions I saw, that by 2050, the year I turn 100, at least 20 million Americans will be suffering from Alzheimer's. Will you be one of them? So I've got some things to talk about that might help prevent that. Things that we know, things that were a part of the American diet before there was Alzheimer's. And don't ever fall for that stupid argument that somehow we're more aware of it. You know, the same thing with autism. Somehow we missed autism 50 years ago when the chances of autism were 1 in 10,000. Somehow we just didn't notice all those autistic children running around. And now, of course, we have an epidemic of autism, and we've got some pretty good ideas today what's causing it. And the same thing with Alzheimer's. And now the predictions are 20 million Americans, 24 years from now, 20 million Americans suffering from Alzheimer's. So I want to get into that. But the not to miss any opportunity with cold and flu season that's going on. The CDC has said, well, there's this little known virus starting to spread through the country, and we don't have a vaccine for it. We just don't know what we're going to do, even though it's cold and flu season. And interestingly enough, like COVID, the symptoms seem awfully similar to the cold and flu. So it's the metapneumovirus, HMPV, the metapneumovirus, spreading from California to the Great Lakes, and of course the CDC is all up in arms about it. The symptoms include, now you tell me if this sounds novelistic, you tell me if this sounds like something that you would be horribly concerned and worried about. Symptoms, according to the CDC, include coughing, includes fever, and it includes nasal congestion. I wonder if I've ever run across that before. And the serious part of this, and for those who suffer from comorbidities, a cold and flu can be very serious, of course. But now the metapneumovirus can be just as serious for those who have comorbidities because it can cause coughing and fever and nasal congestion. And unlike better known respiratory viruses, the HMPV does not have a vaccine or known treatments. How would you treat somebody who had a cough? How would you treat somebody that had a fever? How would you treat somebody with, heaven help us, nasal congestion? If you could answer those three questions, you might be able to help somebody with metapneumovirus if the thing actually exists. So according to Dr. Dean Blumberg, chief of pediatric infectious diseases at UC Davis Children's Hospital, he said this recently in a video released by the school. There's no specific treatment that's generally recommended. For the youngest children, using a bulb syringe to clear the congestion can be helpful. Sometimes a humidifier, or vaporizer may be useful, especially if they have something like croup as a complication of infection, trying to make sure that they don't get dehydrated and still get enough fluids. Which reminds me of a story, a very interesting story. I have every reason to believe that it's true. You don't hear too much about diphtheria anymore. There is a vaccine for it. But 100 years ago, if a child, in diphtheria, people call it diphtheria, it's diphtheria. What happens is a certain bacterial infection takes place in the throat. And the body lays down these mucal barriers, trying to deal with that infection. And it's your body's immune system at work. And depending on the health of the child, which is the ones who are most affected by this, the thickness of this mucal layer in the trachea could get to the point where they can't breathe. And it could kill them. In fact, there was a high rate of mortality with diphtheria a little over 100 years ago. And there is this story recorded by several agencies back then. I have no reason not to believe it. Of a farmer family. And it turned out that their little girl seemed to come down with diphtheria. And the onset was quick, and the increasing seriousness of the symptoms concerned everybody, of course, because she started having trouble breathing. And so the word was put out as fast as possible for the local doctor to come and treat her. And the word finally got to the doc, and he shows up, I believe, in a horse and buggy. So you know that it wasn't, as fast as the local fire department could respond in today's situation. And when he found the little girl, she was burning with fever, struggling to breathe, and he did what he could to comfort her and to give the parents, keep her warm, give her plenty of fluids, this kind of stuff. And there wasn't a whole lot more he could do about it. And he said, I'll come by tomorrow morning and see how she's doing. And so he left, completely expecting her to die during the night, to suffocate. Can you imagine the horror of watching a little 5-6-year-old child, boy or girl, suffocating in your arms, and there's nothing you could do about it? And so the night goes on. The doctor returns the next morning, and the little girl is up running around. To his shocked amazement, no fever, a little bit of congestion still, a little bit of soreness in the throat, but no problem breathing, and looking like she had completely or almost completely recovered. And for Pete's sake, what happened? And the mother said, well, we heard of this treatment that we thought we would try because we had no other choice, and you left us with no options. Not attacking the doctor, but attacking medical understanding of diphtheria at the time. And, well, what was it? What did you do? And the mother said, well, we gathered all the lemons that we could, and we got some lemons from our neighbors. And what we did was we would cut the lemon in sections. And while she was lying on her back, comatose, struggling for air, we would constantly drip a drop of lemon juice into her throat all night long until she recovered. And the doctor said, well, that's ridiculous. He said, I've heard of something like that, but that's ridiculous. What else did you do? Nothing. We just dripped lemon juice from ripe lemons into her throat. Now, this was in Midwest America around the turn of the century. Where do they get ripe lemons? Well, there was a bit of a citrus market back then. It just, the things were as normal from Florida or California, picked green, and then they would ripen in transport. And by the time they got to the marketplace, they were either yellow or orange, whatever. And so she said, we just dripped a drop of lemon juice into her throat until everything cleared. And so the doctor said, yeah, I heard about that treatment. Well, why didn't you say something to us before you left? And he said, well, it's not an approved medical procedure. Well, what in the world was that lemon juice doing to that child? Well, it's very acidic, for one thing, because it has acetic acid in it. And we know that acidification of the tissue kills bacteria. You want to kill bacteria, you put acid on it. You need to be careful of the strength of that acid, or you can burn tissue. But in this case, they didn't worry about it because they were trying to save the life of their little girl. And they got enough lemon juice in there that it not only got into her throat and into her stomach, which got systemic through the bloodstream, it was able to kill and destroy the bacteria that was growing in the bloodstream before she went septic, and it killed the bacterial buildup that was in the throat. Now, this is why some people, if they feel like they have a cold or flu coming on, that they'll take large quantities of ascorbic acid. You notice I call it ascorbic acid, not vitamin C, because ascorbic acid is not vitamin C. It's a part of the vitamin C complex, but it's not vitamin C, because it acidifies the body. People know that if they start to get a cold sore, a fever blister, a canker inside their mouth, they know that if they increase their calcium intake and take a lot of ascorbic acid or a short period of time, 2 or 3 days, it pretty well nullifies the effect of that viral growth inside the body, because it can't exist in an acidic environment, which is some of the nonsense of this idea that you need to be alkaline. It's just another absolute scam that's out there in the marketplace. It's ridiculous. I've said this many times, I'll say it again. I have heard people say that the body is supposed to be alkaline. And there was a huge multi-million-dollar market built around that. Alkalize or die. To me, to tell me that the body should be alkaline, to me is like saying that your body should always be facing north. Yeah, that ridiculous. Your saliva is slightly alkaline. And interestingly enough, the alkalinity or acidity of your saliva very closely represents the pH of the blood. So while we can't necessarily check the pH of the blood from day to day, we can check the pH of our saliva, which is a pretty good indication of what's going on in the blood. And you want it slightly alkaline, 7.2 to 7.4. The stomach, on the other hand, is as hot as battery acid. Does that mean the body should be acidic? No, of course not. And then when the contents of the stomach are released into the duodenum, it's hit with bicarbonate, a very powerful alkaline juice that your pancreas produces to buffer the acid coming out of the stomach so you don't dissolve your small intestine. And then most of the pH through the small intestine is slightly alkaline until you get down to the ileocecal valve, where the small intestine joins the large intestine, where your appendix is. And your appendix is a huge police station along the gut to protect stuff in the colon from getting back into the small intestine, which is simply what SIBO is. And then the further you get into the large intestine, the more acidic it becomes. So if you're talking about the body being alkaline or acidic, it depends on what part of the body you're talking about. Your skin is known as the acid mantle. The surface of your skin should be 4.5 to 5.5 on the pH scale, so that all the crap that you never even know about that lands on your skin during the day is destroyed by that acid mantle. So again, usually where the openings of the body, the vaginal opening, the anus, these are all acidic, where bacteria can get inside the body. The acid barrier there is to stop it from happening. Now, I said all that because with this little girl with diphtheria, the acidic buildup of the lemon juice in her throat killed the bacteria that caused the diphtheria. And her body cleaned it up quickly. So by the next morning, she's up running around. And again, to repeat myself, why didn't you tell, if you knew about this, why didn't you tell us about it? Well, it's not an approved medical procedure. At this point, you just want to throttle that doctor. I don't know if he charged him for the house visit or not, but he was gone, and the little girl was just fine. And where did that understanding come from? From trial and error, from stuff that we've known for hundreds of years. The book, not Jolly. Oh my goodness, I'll think of it here in a minute. A paperback book written by a medical doctor who studied I don't want to say hill people, but the country people of Vermont, and what they could do with sick people with apple cider vinegar. Again, an acidic compound that helped in all kinds of cases where medicine wasn't available. And, oh, come on, Jack. I'll think of it in a minute. Just by using an acid-based compound during sickness can make such a difference in so many people. So when I read about this new pneumovirus thing showing up, meta-pneumovirus, that the CDC is worried about, that I started the program talking about, and they're talking about, the treatments for little kids. Well, a bulb syringe to clear the congestion, maybe a humidifier, maybe a vaporizer in case croup develops, to make sure they don't get dehydrated and they get enough fluids. Those that end up getting Vermont medicine, thank you, Chad. Vermont Folk Medicine by Dr. D.C. Jarvis. Vermont Folk Medicine. It's paperback. You can get it at Amazon. It makes good reading material. Chad, I hope you're stopping by this morning. Chad is the fellow who takes care of my spine. He's a great NUCA doctor. And so people will ask me, well, you're not going to retire, are you? No, I'll probably die in the clinic taking care of patients. Some of my best teachers, my mentors, developing in my system the care that I render, that I learned from them, they died while they were still practicing in their advanced 80s or early 90s. Anyway, so I tell them, no, I've got a fellow that I've been working with for some time. In fact, he and I are talking about the possibility of joining practices. So don't worry if I get to a point where I can't render care, I'll just send you to Chad. All right, now back to this respiratory virus stuff. I have a bottle of apple cider vinegar in my so-called alternative medicine cabinet, where I probably have 50 different products from Standard Process that aren't a part of my regular daily supplement intake. I think there's probably 20 to 24 different products I take every morning. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, adds up to between 50 and 60 pills or capsules. And I take it with my morning tea, different kinds of tea, echinacea tea, peppermint tea, different kinds of teas. And while I'm catching up on the news or catching up on the weather, that I think keeps me going. And I know it keeps me going. Next month I'll be 75 and a half, and I still feel pretty strong, pretty resilient. And I have a full schedule today and some new people to take care of. I took care of a new person yesterday, mid-20s, very serious back pain between the shoulder blades. Very commonplace for back pain, where they can't stand up very long without pain. They can't sit down very long without pain. Even laying down, sometimes laying down is about the only thing they can do to get some relief. But they're on their feet working all day long because they don't have a desk job. They have actually kind of a sales demonstration job. So they're on their feet constantly. And I got some pictures, showed me what the problem was, what side of the body to work on. That's one of the things the x-rays tell me. One side will fix it, the other side just makes things worse. So you got to be careful which side you work on the spine. And as soon as I worked on him, he stood up immediately, sensing that he's taller, which most people experience, because the spine straightens up. And the pain between the shoulder blades that had been there for years was gone that fast, just completely gone. And it wasn't the spine that was causing the problem. It was the muscle contraction surrounding the spine in a certain area that was constantly spastic. And when a muscle gets spastic, gets tight enough, gets balled up, where you can actually palpate the muscle thinking you're touching a bone, it squeezes the tissue and it becomes acidic beyond what it should be, which irritates the nerves, which causes further contraction and more pain. And if I can stop what's causing that muscle contraction, whether it's pain between the shoulder blades or in the low back or sciatica or anything else, there's almost immediate relief to some degree or another. Immediate. Then there's a few visits to follow up to make sure they maintain the correction, and then they're on their way. So I have one person today, I think they're in their late 70s, early 80s with really bad sciatica. Doesn't matter that it's been there their whole life. The cause of the problem has been there their whole life. You stop the cause of the problem goes away. So my half off special is still going, if you want to take advantage of that. But you've got to call for the appointment. You can go to jackstockwell.com and schedule an appointment online, and then my staff will get back to you to really zero in on the best time for you that meets both our schedules. And you'll be scheduled for a half-hour consultation at no charge. At the end of the consultation, if you want to go on your way and you don't think this is for you, we'll still be friends. Everything's fine. If you want me to take care of you, you are scheduled at that.
Same radio news. I'm John Summers.
Sorry.
Yep.
That's interesting. It's not recording. I heard the news break come on, but it's not recording. Maybe it's going over the tower because it's not showing on my computer screen. So I'm going to keep talking. So you'd call the office 801-523-1890 for an appointment. And again, the appointment is at no charge unless you want me to take care of you. So back to the little girl again, and back to this uh, pseudo pneumovirus that's showing up. Nationwide tests are being done by the CDC now, and they have found that through the week of February 28th, the day the Iran war began, 5% tested positive for HMPV, which is the highest percentage since last summer. The percentage, though, interestingly enough, is lower than that of the flu. There are vaccines for the flu. And if I have time in the show today, I want to get to Alzheimer's. And the number one way to avoid Alzheimer's is don't get the flu shot. The relationship, there was a study I remember talking about when I was doing full-time at K-Talk, Monday through Friday. So that's prior to 2015. I remember talking about a study that was out that showed that people who get the flu shot 10 years in a row have something like 600, 700% greater chance of getting Alzheimer's than those that didn't. Now, the CDC just admitted there are more people with the flu than there are with this new virus. But because the new virus doesn't have a vaccine, then of course, it's an all points AP or APO, whatever you call it, all points APB, all points bulletin. So California and Jersey are among the states that have the highest cases. The level of, I'm just going to cut to the chase here, because this is a real clue to this virus. The CDC said this. They found that the virus peaks later on, often in April. And they say this with a straight face. What else peaks in April? Well, let's see. College basketball has just ended through March Madness. There's not so much snow and ice. Temperatures start getting warmer. We are now into daylight savings for the states that have that. So we have more sunshine in the evening when people are outside more than they are early in the morning. Getting more sun, getting more vitamin D, getting better calcium absorption into the bloodstream from their food, strengthening their immune system. If I wrote that article, I would have said, I would write the same thing there. They found that the virus often peaks later, often in April, period. Then I would have put LOL after that. So the researchers said that the study shows that this HMPV is an important cause of respiratory symptoms in both children and adults. So what are they saying you should do about it now? There's no vaccine. There will be one, but not yet. So what do? Well, practice good hygiene during the virus season to prevent it and other viruses. Covering your mouth when you cough or sneeze, and frequently washing your hands, which is all that the original COVID virus actually required. I still like that essential statistic. Back in April of 2020, when they changed how they diagnosed COVID from an infectious fatality to a case fatality. In other words, when they stopped proving you had COVID by a blood test and went to it looks like COVID test, then of course the numbers exploded. People were paralyzed left and right with fear. We couldn't get closer than 6 feet because we all know viruses don't travel more than 6 feet. Schools were shut down, businesses were shut down, businesses went out of business, people were arrested. Just madness, absolute madness. So, will the CDC allow this strain to circulate and naturally attenuate as herd immunity develops, which is the case with anything new that shows up on the scene? Or will they turn this into another COVID circus? So keep your eye on the signs. Keep listening to this program because I will keep up to date with that for you. HMPV. All right. Let me hit a couple other things quickly here before I get to Alzheimer's. The Senate Democrats have introduced a bill to break up the major meatpacking companies. What's that got to do with health? Well, you don't have to think too deeply to think about that. Chucky Schumer and 12 other senators, all Democrat, mind you, not that there's anything wrong with that, introduced legislation about a week ago that would force the nation's largest meat packers to break up their operations across beef and pork and poultry. Why? Well, the Family Grocery and Farm Relief Act would make it illegal for a major meatpacking company to control more than one type of meat. And it would impose concentration caps on the beef markets and give the FTC authority to order divestiture of plants and facilities. The bill would also bar foreign-controlled meatpacking companies, including Brazil-based JBS, from operating in the United States. Schumer said the legislation is because of the direct response to rising grocery costs, citing federal data showing a 16% increase in beef prices over the past year. Now, why would beef prices increase 16% over the last year? Do you know of any other types of monopolistic control in this country that has a direct effect on the price of their product? Do you know any other kinds of businesses that are huge, multi-billion-dollar businesses that are controlled by just a few corporations? Yeah, it wouldn't be too hard to come up with that, would it? So Schumer said, because my point is, of course, you can control prices. Anytime you can control the flow of the market, you control the price, of course. And if it's like, was it Rockefeller that said, I think it was Rockefeller over 100 years ago, monopolies are evil, but there's nothing wrong with owning the competition. Thought that was kind of cute. So the Democrats are doing, Schumer says, what President Trump refuses to do: put the affordability of these crucial foodstuffs, the shortage of it, or the price increase, front and center every day, all year long. So the bill is co-sponsored by 12 other senators, all of which are Democrats. No Republicans have signed on, which again is a testament to when you elect somebody, whether you're electing a Republican or a Democrat, you're not electing an individual. Just remember that. The individual may be running on all kinds of promises based on some kind of innate desire to correct a wrong or right a wrong that they see going on in the legislative process or whatever else. And you put me in office and this is what I'm going to do. And the naive among us believe that. Those of us who've been around the block a couple times know very well that when you elect a Republican or a Democrat, you're electing the party. And it's the party that will decide what's going to be taking place, or that person will not get any re-election money. Which is why I made that big deal. I'm not going to go into it. Something I said, I'm not going to bring politics into this. It's just interesting that the Democrats are getting their positions ready for the midterms. And one thing that would really, the number one issue in America isn't the war in Iran or the Ukraine or even the Epstein files. The number one issue is food prices. Because regardless whether you pay any attention to what's going on politically, you are paying attention to what it costs to put food on the table. And so the Democrats have come out with this bill to bust up the meat packing companies. Because between Armour and a couple of others, they, even though they're competitors, they don't think for a moment they don't sit down together in some isolated cabin up around Lake Jackson in Wyoming for their annual get-together. And what are we going to do this coming year to secure our position in the marketplace and make sure we make more money than we made last year? So under the proposed legislation, the Federal Trade Commission would develop divestiture plans within 120 days. So what's that mean? Well, names like Armour, JBS, the one out of Brazil, whose parent company spent more than $280 million back in 2020 to settle Justice Department charges related to bribery of foreign government officials. The bill also calls for a study of other foreign-owned processors, including the Chinese-owned company Smithfield Foods. The last time you bought a meat product in the grocery store, and on the label it said Smithfield Foods, doesn't it just give you a warm, yummy feeling? Smith, probably the most common name in America. It's owned by China. Anything wrong with that? No, not as long as they put out clean food and they're not involved in any conspiratorial trust relationship between various corporations that the antitrust laws would apply to. So Joe Maxwell, president of Farm Action Fund, said, when the same handful of firms dominate beef, pork, and chicken, competition breaks down, leaving farmers with too few buyers and families paying more as a result. So when you have monopolistic control like this, it's not that you can just set prices between some secret agreement between you, but you limit the number of corporations that are going to buy what the farmers produce, so the farmers can't go to somebody who will offer them more money. Mike Calicrate, a rancher and member of the Ranchers Cattlemen's Action Legal Fund, Stock Growers of America, a cattle producer trade association, said this: it's past time to force antitrust laws and break up these meat monopolies like Congress did back in the 1920s. If the Senate, this is Julie Anna Potts, president and CEO of the Meat Institute. If the senator is trying to make meat and poultry more affordable, this is the wrong approach. It's going to have the opposite effect. Well, you'd expect her to say that. So the ensuing chaos and likely significant drop in meat production will upset delicate supply and demand for the drop in meat production. See, this is what she's supposed to say as the CEO of one of the largest groups that control these prices. Oh, they're just not going to be producing as much meat, as though these giant meat packing companies are the only ones that can do that. Anyway, although this is, I think, a good idea to break up large corporations that control our food supply, there has to be provisions that allow the small farmers to pack their own meat and put it into the marketplace, like they did 100 years ago. I talked to a fellow and his wife from up in Idaho that came in yesterday for me to take care of him. And I've taken care of these people for a long time. Good, just really good people. And there are patients that I develop a friendship with, so that over the years, and I've seen them taking care of them for more than a decade, probably close to 2. So I know what their sons are doing, and I know what they do in their lives outside of their vocations. and we were talking about meat packing, and he was talking about how expensive meat is right now for the small producer. And he said the beef price up in Idaho, in the area where they live, is $5 cut and packed for a half a beef. So you figure a half a beef is going to be, oh, I don't know, 700 pounds. Maybe that might be a bit more, but at 600 pounds at $5 cut and wrapped, that's $3,000. And so I said, that sounds kind of high to me. And he said, yes, it's high. He said it wasn't that long ago when it was $3.50 cut and packed. And I said, is that grass pastured? He said, yes. I says, is it grain free? He said, oh no, all these people feed grain the last 3 months to fatten the animal up. And I said, well, not all of them. There are those who are very purist about this, and they make sure that when they say grass pastured beef, it was pastured right till the time that animal was processed. He said, well, that doesn't taste as good. Well, maybe not, but that's not the issue. The issue was there are a lot of private packers in the state of Utah. I'm thinking of Bingham up in Morgan, where the last time I got beef. I have many patients who raise beef and have told me, hey, just tell me what you want. Tell me what you want, and I'll give you the best competitive prices. And I said, well, the only thing I'm really interested in are some steaks and chops and 85% hamburger. Oh, no problem. We can get that for you easily. But I said, it's got to be grass pastured, grass raised. I don't want them eating anything but grass and flowers and herbs. And I want a stream running through the middle of that property that they drink from. No problem. So anywhere along the Wasatch Front, down into San Pete, down into south central Utah, there are plenty of places to get meat like this that privately they are cut, or they're processed and wrapped and packed and wrapped. And frozen. You go, you pick them up in crates, take them home, put them in your freezer. Well, the laws that allow that aren't the same from state to state. And they're still under surveillance to some degree by county health department, which I think is a good thing. County health ought to go in there every now and then, especially at the height of season, take a few meat samples and take them back to the lab to make sure they're clean. E. coli has a chance of running free in this stuff. But when was the last time in our state that you heard of anybody selling bad beef that was by an individual packer in this state? Not a commercial brand, but an individual. I don't remember the last time I heard anything like that. And the same thing with raw milk, except for that trumped up false case against Utah Natural Meat a couple of years ago, regarding their, they got shut down for a few weeks because somebody claimed there was something bad in the milk. And after investigation, and the county health department comes back and says, well, we didn't really find anything. We're sorry. After they lost half their market. That's where I buy my raw milk. I like it because there's no grain used with these animals. It's just straight grass. And when the grass isn't available, they get hay. And it's just very creamy. Now, there's other good raw milk outlets in the state of Utah. I have nothing against any of them. I just buy according to taste. And I like Utah Natural Meats out there on 5600 West and about 7400 South. Sometimes I will buy Redmond Farms milk if I don't have time to run out to the west. Redmond's a good milk too. I just think the other one's a little creamier. Anyway, beside that, what this bill is pushing for is for the smaller meat packer to be able to do their own stuff and sell it commercially outside of their distribution store that might be on their ranch, to actually get it into the marketplace. And of course, the big meat packers are saying, oh, we can't have that. We can't have that. We'll have a shortage of meat. Yeah. All right, let me go. Let me go on from this. What time we got? We're almost through with the first hour. I have a tendency to run out in the weeds. I hope it's okay. I try to make this informative and help you have a common sense look at what's going on here. Now, 56% of Americans now suspect, now this was published last summer, 56% of Americans now suspect COVID-19 vaccine caused mass deaths. As I said, at one point, it was believed to be a conspiracy theory. Public opinion said, oh, that's nonsense. COVID vaccines save lives because the FDA, the CDC tell us that they're safe and effective. Even our own county health people here in the state of Utah assured us that COVID vaccines were safe and effective. Well, public opinion is shifting, and the public wants action because peer-reviewed analysis exposes how the vaccine cartel propped up its fraudulent talking point. Millions of lives saved. Now, a new Rasmussen survey of 1,158 likely U.S. voters that was conducted last September with a plus or minus 3% error margin said that 56% of those who were surveyed believe the side effects from COVID-19 shots have likely caused a significant number of unexplained deaths. And nearly a third of them said it was very likely. And only a third dismissed the idea. And this shows that what was once, as I said, a conspiracy theory has become the mainstream view. And the majority of Americans now believe vaccine harms are real and widespread. Why do you think you haven't seen a tremendous nationwide push for vaccines this last cold and flu season? Because people are waking up. And what they're going to do is wait for people to go back to sleep. Then they'll start pushing it again. Now, support for HHS Secretary Bobby Kennedy Jr. reflects this shift because half of the voters said that the government health officials deserve criticism for their handling of the pandemic, while 42% of those surveyed said the CDC employees should be fired for their role in misleading the public. And among those who strongly believe the shots caused death, over 70% of them want the CDC staff fired. Now, there's still partisan stuff because 70% of the Republicans, 46% of Democrats, and 54% of independents think the vaccines caused the deaths. But the skepticism crosses party lines and racial lines. In fact, our black population, 64%, and our Hispanic population, 57%, are more likely than the white voters, 54%, suspect that there was deadly vaccine effects. That's an interesting thing. I hope this doesn't sound racist. But something that I've noticed, a trend among our black population. When they're concerned about something, pay attention. Is that racist for me to say that? Because a lot of our black population knows what's been done to them by the U.S. government. And I think you know what I'm referring to. Not just the Tuskegee experiment, but what happened during World War II, what happened during the Korean War, experiments with this, experiments with that. So our black population naturally suspects anything coming out of the government relative to health anyway. So if you were to see a news comment here and there or read something somewhere where a good portion of the black population of America is concerned about this or that, I think it's worth paying attention to. So the takeaway from all of this is a credible, nationally representative poll now confirms most Americans believe the COVID-19 shots have killed many people, and they want accountability from the CDC and the government health leaders. And you saw what happened this week with this lunatic judge overturning everything that Bobby Kennedy Jr. has done this last year relative to vaccines. Now, of course, it's going to be overturned on appeal because that kind of power doesn't exist. Despite the fact that there are certain characters and personalities in our federal government now that exhibit extra constitutional behavior, that's no excuse for our health agencies to be doing the same thing. Or some liberal judge, by whatever pressure, by whatever coercion, by whatever means, when he was pushed by pharmaceutical cartels to issue an edict that overturns what the Secretary of HHS, a very powerful position in the presidential cabinet, that just by some federal judge saying, I don't like that, I overturn it. That's just not right. That's just not right. And so the ACIP, the review group of 17 doctors that Bobby Kennedy Jr. fired and replaced with 17 new ones, he fired them because they all of them had strong connections with pharmaceutical interests. And they're sitting there reviewing the vaccine policies. He put on 17 new ones that do not have connections, nor do they own stock in pharmaceutical companies. And that federal judge said, "You're fired." Something wrong with that. Well, it will definitely be overturned under appeal. It better be overturned under appeal. All right, now, one more thing I want to talk about for a moment. A doctor out of Brown University, a medical science professor. What's happened to him because of some information he released? He just had patiently explained to a reporter in a Zoom conference that the science behind a paper he had published on how cancer cells respond to the spike protein found in COVID-19 vaccines. And now he's kind of regretting that he said and did what he did because of what's happened. He said this: "At what point do you acknowledge the weaponization of pub peer that is causing harm to individuals, causing distress, disrupting people's lives in a way that I have been experiencing? I've called it criminal activity, and I think it's criminal activity that needs to be investigated." Now, he teaches about cancer and oncology, precision oncology. He serves as director of Brown La Loretta Cancer Center and director of the Joint Program in Cancer Biology at Brown and affiliated hospitals. You think he knows something about cancer? So, reflecting on some recent attacks against his friends in the scientific community, he continued by saying this: "Why are you doing this to scientists? I have," the poor naive man, "I have for decades been saying things like scientists, biomedical researchers are one of our most precious national resources. We should respect people who've dedicated their lives to make things better for the rest of us. Things that have happened in medicine and science just make it less fun to go into these professions. The things..." All right. I will mute my K-Talk broadcast because there is something coming across the top of the hour news. Oh, I don't know. Now it looks like it might have stopped. Let me go on. Well, now nothing's coming. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Anyway, so here we are. Here we are with well-meaning, qualified researchers who come out and reveal the latest that they have discovered in their research that goes against the status quo, goes against what the political bent of the day wants you to believe, and then they, of course, get punished for it. Now, like many top scientists, this Dr. Eldiri says he's been attacked and discredited on PubPeer. I often refer people to PubMed to find research on a particular subject that they're looking for. Well, PubPeer looks back at some of this research from peer review of people outside of the peer review arena that reviewed the article that was published in the first place. In other words, if you do a peer-reviewed research, what simply means once you've finished your research and you're ready to publish it, you send it out to 20, 50 different research organizations and have them look at it. And they're going to look at it and they're going to say, regardless of whether they support the idea of the research or not, they're going to look at the research design. And they're going to say, yes, whether they agree with the results or not, they're going to say, yes, this is a well-designed study. And, as usual, it indicates we need more study or something like that. But they'll say, yeah, it falls inside the envelope of what would be considered good scholastic research. And then you can say your study was peer-reviewed. Now, that's not good enough for people who don't agree with the results of the study. So they'll go get a bunch of other peers who have a different opinion. Well, it won't stop your research from being published. It's just there'll be some article out there by other people who said, well, so why are they attacking him? So this, a very widely researched, respected oncologist, he has published over 500 cancer research papers during several decades of his career. Over 500. And years ago, he identified the mechanisms of the TP53 gene, which is a very critical tumor suppressor, which has often been referred to as the guardian gene of the genome that stops cell division to maintain genomic stability by preventing DNA damage. So a little over a week ago at the Maha Institute, Make America Healthy Again, there was roundtable discussion about the epidemic of vaccine injuries. And it was held at the Willard Hotel in Washington, D.C. And he reflected on how, Dr. Deary reflected on how he's been treated since his paper questioned the safety of COVID vaccines. That's all he did, is he questioned the safety behind it. He said, for years, I've understood that P53 is the center of universe for cancer research. And we know that some viruses can cause cancer. And when the pandemic broke out, he said he began studying ways of blocking COVID infections and the severity of COVID and whether the COVID virus could cause cancer. And he said that his research found that the spike protein from the vaccine, as well as the spike protein in the actual COVID virus itself, may be associated with an increase in cancer. Now, how many of us have heard that already from a number of other places, including Dr. Ryan what's his name up in Idaho, the pathologist, who was one of the first voices talking about turbo cancer showing up as a result of that vaccine. Well, here's Dr. Deary, written over 500 papers on cancer, saying, yeah, there may be a relationship there. In describing his paper at this meeting last week, he said, I thought we were very well balanced. He said, we didn't offer any conclusions that could not be scientifically supported. But such information obviously is going to challenge the status quo. And it didn't go over well. So all the pub peer attacks began. And so he was asked to serve on a subcommittee on the Advisory Commission on Immunization Practices, the ACIP that I was just talking about, to further study these vaccines. And after accepting and digging in, he and his colleagues found and shared with the ACIP slides and presented these slides along with Tufts University Charlotte Cooperwasser, details about the unexpected immune changes, biodistribution of the spike protein throughout the body, various impurities that showed up in the drug, and the cancer that occurred following the shots. Oh, I'm just checking something here. All right. So, examples of the increase in cancer that he was referring to. The CDC data showed colorectal cancer deaths among people ages 15 through 44 are surging. When you heard or hear about somebody that had cancer of the colon, what age group did they usually fall into? Now there's teens getting colorectal cancer. And it was in colorectal cancer increasing among people who got the shot. Dr. Pierre Corey and journalist Mary Beth Pfeiffer also noted a 37% spike in uterine cancer in 25 to 44 age group, among women, of course, over 4 years. Liver and pancreatic cancer deaths increased disproportionately in young adults between 2019 and 2022. Where's all this coming from? Well, they noticed that these increases in cancer and the so-called turbo cancers followed the injection of the COVID vaccine into these people. And so all he's saying, as we look at these dramatic numbers, it's not that we can't find some other suitable or reliable reason why this may have happened. He's saying it's interesting that it's happening among people who had the vaccine. It's just like, Doctor, what's his name? The one who got massacred because he said he found measles virus markers in the guts of children with autism. You remember him. I'll think about it here for a second. And he got crucified, claiming that the MMR vaccine caused autism. He didn't say that at all. All he said was, in the children that they were taking care of for autism, they started looking at their gut, and they would do biopsies of the gut wall, and they found markers from the MMR vaccine in their gut wall at a higher percentage than otherwise. And all they said was, this bears looking into further. And then you remember what happened to the poor man. Well, he was eventually proven to have been correct. He was exonerated in court. You don't still hear too much about him anymore because everybody still thinks that because of what he said, what he did, there's no relationship whatsoever between the MMR and autism. But there's tons of information that's come out since then that greatly implicates the MMR vaccine. All right, so where's all this going? It's just how strong the industry is in prolonging the abuse against anybody who comes out and reports well-constructed, well-designed, authoritative outcomes from their study that indicates there's something wrong with the status quo. So whether it's vaccines, in this case, COVID-19 vaccine, or some other medical treatment, if it interrupts the marketplace, you're going to pay for it. Now, the prolonged abuse of Dr. Deary suffered for producing science that seeks nothing more nor less than the truth, is greater than simply the abuse of a man who has dedicated his life to healing people with cancer. It is designed to stifle scientific debate and free speech. It's designed to ruin careers, no matter how stellar that career might be. He said, right now I'm fighting this because I don't have a choice. The current situation is completely unacceptable and I can't continue like this. Now there's a hero. There's somebody who the president should pull into the White House and hang one of those citizen awards around his neck for standing up against the power of money. All right, now another thing that I think needs to be addressed, and that's the heartbreak of Alzheimer's disease. I've been asked, I wasn't asked to do what I've spent most of the morning show on. I just wanted to do that because it's current in the news, and every now and then a hero shows up, and I think they need to be lauded for that. Dr. Deary out of Brown University. And this just happened this month, or it just got into the news this month. That's in the MAHA report, Make America Healthy Again. You can just Google that and read the whole thing for yourself. TheMahaReport.com. A lot of good information that shows up in there. From it's a Substack, and it is supported by some very good authority figures. All right, what do we have here? Quarter after the hour. Now, as I said at the beginning of this program, it is predicted by 2050 that 20 million people with Alzheimer's disease, which is rather scary because this disease is very difficult to treat. I mean, it seems as if this problem was unheard of 75 years ago, as I used 1950 as the example, the year of my birth, where you didn't hear the word. You didn't hear the word autism. And as unscientific as it might be, I just remember the kids I grew up with. I had some really happy memories as a child. Living in southern Maryland while my parents worked at Patuxent Naval Test Center as civilians working for the government. And the life that we had there, my friends at school at Piney Point Elementary, and the summers in the neighborhood where we lived, it was kind of like on a type of a circle type thing, and in the middle of all these different houses was this minor miniature pine forest. And if that wasn't enough, you could cross a couple of streets and go into some very heavy duty pine forest areas where we would play army, we would play hide and seek, we'd play different kinds of games. And I still remember those friends. I remember Ray and Kay Cameron that lived in the house right across the sidewalk from where we were, a little older than me. But I remember them and playing softball out in the front yard. And I remember several other friends, and I remember my friends in elementary school. There wasn't anybody. I don't remember anybody that would be considered autistic. And I've thought about this many times. I probably had a teacher or two that thought I might have been because my behavior was often reported to my parents. But I think it was part of me that knew there was a better way to get an education than sitting in a classroom full of kids being indoctrinated by a government paid official. But somewhere in my heart of hearts, I knew there was a better way to learn. And I should have been outside playing softball or playing football, or playing foursquare or playing hide and seek in the forest than sitting in that classroom. My point is this. One of the big arguments, full of holes that it is, we just weren't that aware of it back 75 years ago. We just weren't aware of Alzheimer's. We just weren't aware of autism. And only as better scientifically oriented controls of diagnosis showed up were we ever ready and able to better recognize it in our communities. There are people who believe that. And for those who believe that, I've got this oceanfront property in Arizona for you that I'm trying to divest and sell out of my trust. Now, what's this got to do with Alzheimer's? I can't help but wonder whether all the newest drugs and vaccines and chemotherapeutic therapies and shots of all kinds for all kinds of reasons, and the general prescription load, because I have patients that are on as many as 12 prescriptions annually. Maybe not all 12 at the same time, but some of them, at least 12 different ones over a 12-month period. They're shocked that I'm not on any medication. Has that contributed to this Alzheimer's problem? And one of the most destructive, as I've said before, is the flu vaccine. Now, we may never find out if new medical procedures are causing these legions of Alzheimer's patients, but I recommend the following to my patients when they ask me about autism. Number one, avoid flu shots. Do you know anybody that got the flu after they got their flu shot? We had this discussion in the office yesterday. You know anybody that got shingles after they got the Shingrix vaccine, the shingles vaccine? Number two, you want to try and keep your prescriptions at a minimum. I know many of you need your prescriptive medication. I understand that. I don't question that. And when I am asked for alternatives to their prescriptions when they're in my clinic, I just kind of have to be the professional at the moment and say, that's outside my scope of practice. That's something you need to discuss with your doctor. Now, if you would like some help with nutritional support of your heart, for which you're taking these medications, I can offer you some nutritional suggestions that we know will strengthen the heart muscle. We know in most cases, not all, but in most cases will diminish your arrhythmias. That will, not in all cases, but most cases, increase your ejection fraction. Not in all cases, but most cases, get you up off the couch and get you out walking around the neighborhood. I'm more than willing to help you do that, but I'm not going to make any comments regarding the medication you're on because that's outside my scope of practice. Number one, avoid flu shots. Number two, try to keep your prescriptions at a minimum, because once you are taking 3 or more drugs, all bets are off. With no medical or pharmaceutical expert could possibly fathom the myriad of chemical interactions that are taking place in your body if you're on at least 4 medications. Now, I've mentioned this story before. I took care of a pharmacologist at one time, not a pharmacy technician, not a pharmacy degreed pharmacy fellow, but a pharmacologist, which is a PhD level of pharmacology. And pharmacologists don't work in pharmacies. They do consulting work with medical doctors on compounding and side effects and things like that, especially with new drugs being tested, to help the MDs do as little damage as possible with the new drugs. And so I was talking to him once. I can still remember where I was standing and where he was sitting in one of my treatment rooms at my old office there, just south of where I'm at now. And I said to him, what's the possibility of being able to track all of the interactions caused by the use of 3 or 4 prescriptive medications? And he looked me right in the eye and he said, hell, Jack, we can't track all the interactions of 2 drugs. That was a real eye-opener for me. Now, I've talked to a few MDs since then, one that I'm currently taking care of. And I asked him about that, and he kind of poo-pooed it. Now, he's not a pharmacologist, but he is an MD that prescribes medications. He said, oh, now we've got that pretty well worked out. We know what the interactions are. Well, maybe. So avoid flu shots. Keep your prescriptions at a minimum. Number 3, exercise. Your odds of getting Alzheimer's are 4 times greater if you don't exercise between the ages of 20 and 60. Now that I'm 75, I don't have to exercise. Of course, I'm kidding. It's ridiculous. And now that the weather's better, I'm going to be back out hoofing it around the neighborhood. But everyone should exercise at least 4 hours a week, and it is never too late to start. So I was talking to this lady 2 days ago who has some rather serious low back pain. And I saw her for the second time. And she had a little bit of relief, but not a whole lot. And she was asking me what she can do about it. I said, well, you know, you've come to me at the end of the degenerative cycle of your spine. This is going to take me more than just a few visits to get this back in shape, but you need to move. And she's, you know, a little overweight, not a whole lot, but a little overweight. And I said, you need to get up and move. Well, I want to, but my hips hurt. And I said, well, do you have a swimming pool? No. Do you have access to a swimming pool? Well, we could join a gym. And I said, well, I want you to get into the pool. Chest high depth of water. Because that water will give you resistance as you walk, and the water will provide buoyancy to lessen the pressure on your hip joints when you walk. And she looked at me with just this look on her face like, I can do that. Yeah, of course you can do that. What's it cost? I think Lifetime, they're in South Jordan. I think they're $100 a month, maybe less than that. And they have, if I remember right, they have two swimming pools, big pools. And there are some other gyms around the valley, or exercise places that have a pool. Yeah, if your hips are killing you, it's stopping you from walking, and so you spend all time, the rest of the day sitting on the couch trying to find out what Dr. Phil has to say next. Get in that swimming pool at least 3, if not 4 days a week for an hour, and just walk around in your half float, half walk, because the water you're moving against will give you resistance. It will start to toughen up your muscles and strengthen the ligaments of the joints that are holding your hips together. This is what I was telling you. And she looked at me and she said, man, I can do that. Well, of course you can do that. For the rest of us, at least 3 days a week for a good hour walk at 3 miles an hour. 3 miles an hour is a walk you can do where you do a mile every 20 minutes, and chart out from your home some destination that's a mile and a half away and walk to it and back to the house. You may only be able to do a block or two to begin with. You may only be able to go up and down the stairs in your house to start with, but start. And then you mark that destination in different directions, a mile and a half away, walk to it and walk back 3 times a week. You will do wonderful things for the oxygenation of your brain, let alone your heart and your muscles. Number 4, avoid in any semblance whatsoever aluminum cookware. There's a striking correlation between the buildup of aluminum in brain tissue and Alzheimer's. Where do you get aluminum in your brain? You're right, vaccines. If the vaccine doesn't have mercury in it, you can damn well bet it's got aluminum in it, and aluminum cookware. So I've had people ask me, well, what about steel cookware that has an aluminum base? I think you're better off if you just do stainless steel in the first place, or cast iron. It's hard to beat cast iron for cooking. I mean, that's how our ancestors cooked, with cast iron before there was steel. And they didn't have Alzheimer's. They had crazy Uncle Bob who wouldn't come down out of the tree, but that was rather rare. Number 5, avoid chlorine and fluorine. If you can get them out of your drinking water and your bathing water, I have a chlorine restrictor shower head. I don't think it grabs the fluorine, but it does grab the chlorine. And I can tell when I am having a shower that has chlorine in the water because my skin gets itchy. And as long as I am using a chlorine collector in the shower head, I don't have that problem. The combination of fluorine and chlorine and aluminum cookware. I mean, if you need information on getting these brain and thyroid poisons out of your water, there's plenty of good websites on the matter. There are at Home Depot various shower heads that have, for less than $50, shower heads that have chlorine collectors in the shower head. And I'm telling you, within a week to 2 weeks of stopping chlorine in your bath water or your shower water, your skin is going to feel different. But the problem is these things have a way of collecting in the thyroid gland. and blocking iodine from getting its job done. That has a direct effect on the health of the brain. You want, number 6, eat 1/3 of your diet raw with a large consumption of vegetables weekly. And get organic produce in season if at all possible. Stay away from all the processed foods. Stay away from the bad oils, including salad dressings. These things are brain killers. And the hateful 8. Soybean, canola, grapeseed, cottonseed, sunflower, there's one of them here I'm trying to, it's one of the worst of all. It's worse than canola or soybean. Yeah. I wasn't expecting to talk about this, so I don't have my notes. If you got to have a salad dressing to eat your salad, and I can't eat salad without salad dressing, olive oil, extra virgin cold processed olive oil with some good balsamic vinegar or some good apple cider vinegar makes an incredibly healthy, delicious salad dressing. That's the store-bought stuff, I'm telling you, is going to smoke your brain. Eat fish or take a supplement of raw flax oil or cod liver oil every day. I take 4 flax oil from, you can get it at forbiddendoctor.com, flax oil B6. I take 4 of those capsules every morning. I took 4 of them this morning. Is it doing me any good? Well, according to the science, it does, yes. According to personal experience, I feel like my brain's working. Yeah, I've got a little memory here and there, but I'm 75. There's some things 20 years ago I would have remembered that I, got to think about it today. But I think for the most part, I got some people that might disagree with that. But I think for the most part, my brain still works pretty good. Activate your mind. Keep your mind busy by reading, by solving problems, interacting with friends and family if they're safe to be around, and staying active mentally. My father, who lived just a couple of weeks short of 96, liked a Sudoku. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Sudoku. And the thing about him that impressed me with his Sudoku is that he would figure it out before he would write any numbers in the squares. I mean, that's how his brain worked. He was a very active figure-outer. And I remember watching him sometimes if he was working on a situation with a car engine, or he was working on something around the house. I would watch him staring at the project, and he had it done in his head before he grabbed the hammer. And so he would do this with Sudoku. And so I spent a week with him, a month before he passed. And while I could see diminished health, and he spent a lot of time sleeping, and while I could see diminished brain activity in the sense that he wasn't initiating conversations or discussion, he could converse with me with good memory for the most part and active participation in a back and forth discussion with me a month before he passed at 96. And I hardly ever saw him without his little Sudoku book. And as I said, whether it was a small little 9-number square or a bigger square, he would sit there and stare at that thing and have it figured out before he wrote down the first number. Because then he would just fill in the blanks, just write the numbers in. No erasures. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Or word searches. where I'm living, there are other people my age, and I notice them mostly retired. And a lot of them are sitting around, either reading or they're doing those word search problems, or Sudoku, or some other kind of puzzle or crosswords. That keeps the synaptic connections in your brain working instead of your synaptic connections turning into dust. Get your B vitamins. That's the next one. I highly recommend 2 sources. Cataplex B Core, which I take 4 of every morning at forbiddendoctor.com, or folic acid B12. Folic acid being one of the B vitamins and B12 being very important. Food-based B12, mind you, B12 only comes from animal-based products. That's very important to know. These things will not cure Alzheimer's. I don't mean to imply that if you were to do all these things, someone suffering from Alzheimer's would be cured. But it will give them the best, simplest, almost free means to fight back against this terrible crippler that many of us are headed for. Now, what's the effect of exercise for an Alzheimer's patient? How much exercise do they really get? How much attention is placed on, because a lot of us will kind of move our parents or loved one into some kind of assisted care, a place that has nursing facilities available or provides meals. How much exercise are these people getting? I was in one of those facilities not too terribly long ago. I may be in one this weekend. And usually what I see is the same thing I see in a hospital setting. And I have been in the hospital 3 or 4 times in the last year visiting patients. And I'll see somebody out in the hall, maybe by themselves, but usually with a loved one, pushing their little IV stand in their hand, their hand on their IV stand because they've got some drip going on, walking up and down the hall at a various different kind of paces. But I don't see anything more constructive than that going on as far as exercise is concerned. I've often said what I would love to see at a hospital is a cork-based track outside next to the hospital, preferably with an open dome on top so they can get sunshine. But they got a track they can walk around. And in the middle of that track, instead of a football field or a soccer field, have organic farming going on so that those organic foods can be a part of what those patients eat in their meals during the day. To me, that would be an ideal hospital. And of course, having a few chiropractors on staff. Now, Alzheimer's and all kinds of mental problems and dementia. And Alzheimer's, not all dementia is Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. There's other kinds of dementia. There are some kinds actually worse than Alzheimer's, if you can imagine it, like Lewy body, L-E-W-I, Lewy body dementia. I had a friend pass from that, a NUCA doctor, and it was sad. The last few weeks of that doctor's life. But it swallows up a huge portion of the American health budget to deal with these things. And for a while, medicine felt that Alzheimer's was genetic. And then various newer studies indicated that this condition exists far beyond genetics. And some of the latest and most intriguing data shows that Alzheimer's is related to a lack of exercise and a lack of stimulating brain activity. So you go walking with a friend and you try to work up to where you can do a 3-mile-an-hour pace which is just short of losing your breath. What's the best walking speed? Just short of losing your breath, where you can carry on a conversation without having to huff and puff. And then you're with somebody else that has a stimulating conversation, so that those synaptic connections in your brain between the axon and the dendrite don't turn into dust, but stay active in neurotransmission from the hemispheres, right and left, from the upper brain, lower brain, brainstem, cerebellum, vestibular network, to keep that brain working. It's the ultimate use it or lose it, just like muscles, just like bone. Now, the data shows that people who were less physically active between ages 20 and 60 had a dramatic increased risk of developing Alzheimer's. Who would that be between 20 and 60 who had less of an active life? People sitting in a chair all day long in their office at a desk, who didn't have exercise of some form before they went to work or after they got home from work. That's a very interesting statistic, because when you evaluate some of the older patients about the same age, those with Alzheimer's found to be 4 times as likely to have been couch potatoes between 20 and 60. Now, is it fair to say that somebody is programming a computer 8 hours a day as a couch potato? Yeah, I would say so. Unless they have an active exercise program. Now, there's some smart companies. I know Adobe, there at the point of the mountain, has these exercise rooms, treadmills, paddleball courts, where they expect people to take breaks to go exercise, to flush their brains with oxygenated blood. There are people who have the riser type of platform for their computer screens, so they spend some of the time sitting down, other times standing up, doing their computer work. And there are those who have slow treadmills that's underneath their chair and their desk that go all the way up to about 1.5 to 2 miles an hour. Doesn't go any higher than that. And has a little slight elevation to it, so that they can continue typing. They can continue reading their screen while they're slowly walking about 1 mile an hour. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because when the study said 4 times as likely to get Alzheimer's between 20 and 60, if between 20 and 60 they were couch potatoes, that means they didn't have any exercise. And the one activity in which Alzheimer's patients outperformed their counterparts as a couch potato wasn't reading, wasn't doing Sudoku, it was watching television. That's what this study revealed. The majority the overall time-consuming behavior of a couch potato between 20 and 60, who was 4 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's, were television addicts. And as far as studies go, this one used very rigorous data collection and tabulation, and the results are very intriguing. Based on this and all the other benefits of exercise, I've always recommended exercise to my patients. I don't stop. Well, that's not true. I try to get about a half-hour nap between the first period of the day and the second period, because I'll see patients. I'll start seeing patients as soon as this show's over with. I'll be right in the office seeing patients, and I'll see patients usually as late as 5:30, almost 6 o'clock, almost 5 days a week. And I'm constant. Anybody who's seen me working sees me bending over and constantly going back and forth between 2 rooms or 3 rooms, constantly on the move. Does that constitute exercise? It constitutes joint activity. You know, it's not real. I wouldn't really consider it cardio because I don't think my heart rate ever increases unless something makes me angry, which hardly ever happens anymore. But and now that it's warmer, as I said at the beginning of the show, 896 subscribers on YouTube. Those of you who are listening on the stream, I'm only 4 subscribers away from 900. And then it's going to be the dash to 1,000 subscribers. This health program right here is just 4 subscribers short of 900. If you have subscribed and you go to youtube.com/breaking health barriers, if you haven't done that, please do that and subscribe. It will help the algorithm. It will help me. If you like what I'm talking about, if you think this has any benefit to anybody else, you can help spread the word by just subscribing to that channel. We're only 4 short now of 900. All right, so back to the exercise thing that I'm talking about. I recommend exercise to all my patients, let alone whether they got Alzheimer's or not, or any other form of dementia. In fact, alongside nutrition, exercise, especially weight training. You don't have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, just some resistance training, is probably the most profound way to bring the fastest health beneficial results to older people. And the kind of weight training I like isn't where you just go into the gym and start pumping iron like there's no tomorrow. You do the fatigue type stuff. And that's often done with bands. But it's a different way of exercising muscles where they don't have a chance to relax during the exercise period. You just have constant strain on the muscle. You don't go all the way up, you don't go all the way down where you can rest. It's somewhere in between where you have constant strain. You don't have to do much of that at all. You just fatigue the muscle. And when you get to the point where your arm won't move or your leg won't move because it's fatigued, you did it. You did the job. If I can get people to improve their diets, if I can get them to start on some supplementation until they learn to eat better, as I've said to many patients when they say, do I have to take all these pills? No, of course not. Just eat better. Get rid of the processed and ultra-processed foods. And I gave you a test. A lady asked me about that last week in the clinic, about how the test is going. How you test for ultra-processed foods. It's really simple. You get a 12-ounce glass of water, put in about 8 ounces of water in there, and put a chunk of whatever that is, and put it in the water and let it sit there for 4 or 5 hours. If it's looking exactly like it was when you put it in there, it's not overly processed. If it's turned into some kind of a mush, it's overly processed, don't eat it. Why not? Because there's no nutrition in it. And you're just stuffing yourself with useless carbohydrates that keep your insulin levels high and keeps the fat belly present. All right, now, in the same way we use different numbers in high blood pressure to try to gain clues as to the cause, the different symptoms associated with mental problems, like Alzheimer's, can often provide some clues to the nutritional cause. Because I think there's a very big nutritional aspect to Alzheimer's. And the patients who have high blood pressure obviously need to be treated with a protocol that declogs and decalcifies their arteries. Proper digestion is very important here. And with attention to protein digestion, because I think we've learned in our elderly community and I haven't got there yet. Elderly would be 76 and older. They have a hard time getting an adequate amount of protein, and the amount of protein they do try to get, they don't adequately digest it because they're so low on stomach acid. So anytime when people ask me, well, what should they be eating if they're talking about a family member that's starting to exhibit signs of dementia? And I said, it's not so much what they're eating as what they're digesting. And then I'll tell them the seed oils have got to go. Breakfast cereal has got to go. Most anything in a box, a bag, or a can. There are exceptions, because in my kitchen in the office, there are 2 cans of black beans. And I love black beans. And they have an awful lot to do with the lunch that I eat. But they're in a can. And organic. So there are some exceptions. But mostly, foods that you get from the produce section, the organic produce section, foods that you get from clean meat or clean fish, and that will just absolutely turn things around, but they need a digestive aid. And the thing that I tell them the most is Zypan. It's a digestive enzyme that has several different ingredients in it that makes up for the lack of your stomach's digestive ability that has resulted from 2 causes. Number 1, malnutrition most of your life. And number 2, the fact that you're getting older and you don't need as much food. And therefore, your stomach is not producing enough enzymes or acid to break down the proteins that you're already short of. So we're going to increase the protein in the diet, and we're going to increase the body's ability to digest that, to make sure the brain is getting the nutrition it needs to function correctly in your 80s or your 90s. My mother, in 2 weeks, what's today's date? We're the 18th, right? In less than 2 weeks, she's going to turn 90. And I just had a conversation on the phone with her yesterday. Just like any other time in her life that I had a discussion with her. Completely up to date with what's going on. Completely aware of everything around her. Still driving a car because she recently passed the eye test for driving. So she's, the champion of her neighborhood. And she's going to be 90 here on the 27th. And she runs 2 households. The one in Florida and the one in Utah, where she'll be here in a couple of months as she travels back and forth. And takes care of herself. Has a group of ladies that she hangs around with, trying to get into trouble wherever they can. And she's still completely active. She takes a bunch of enzymes and a nutritional protocol that I put her on every day, every morning. She takes her supplements. And I know she's very cautious about what she eats. And her brain is still working just fine at 90 years old. Now, along with Zypan, I recommend AF beta food. That keeps your bile flowing, keeps your bile thin, keeps plenty of bile present, and it produces a lot of nitric oxide to keep those blood vessels dilated. Now, there are some patients with specific B vitamin deficiencies, with certain mental issues. I will probably add niacinamide B6. But that's if there is depression. Now, some of these patients have certain mineral deficiencies, and we're kind of running out of time here. I want to kind of run through this quickly. But I recommend something called Mintran, or organically bound minerals, because they have the essential micronutrient level of minerals the brain needs to function correctly. This is part of the process of eating overly processed foods. There's hardly any minerals left in them. and we are mineral-based creatures. We're always talking about the importance of vitamins. You don't hear as much about minerals as you should. You're hearing more than you did a couple of decades ago. But the minerals are what is involved in chemical processes in the body. Vitamins are enzymes that are designed to bring minerals into a chemical reaction inside the body. To have vitamins without the minerals is like having a gun without the bullets. So along with better digestion, and that's what I'm recommending, Zypan, Z-Y-P-A-N, just like it sounds. A-F, letter A, letter F, beta food, B-E-T-A-F-O-O-D. Along with that, I recommend either Mintran or organically bound minerals, depending on their heart situation. But either one of them will work because they're loaded with food-based minerals. They're not minerals from the Great Salt Lake. They're not minerals from some mountain reserve. Those minerals are designed for your garden. Some people will bring in the supplements that they take, and I look at the minerals, and they're all ground up rocks. Let's take these minerals and go spread them through the dirt of your garden. So your garden plants can make something out of them your body can actually use. If your minerals that you're taking do not have a mess of foods listed in the label, you're kidding yourself and you're wasting your money. There's some more things. I wanted to get into the patient with hormone imbalances or hormone deficiencies relative to Alzheimer's, but I'll have to do that at a later date. And then the effect of omega-3 fatty acids on brain function. But we are out of time, and K-Talk is going to go to break here in a minute, and I'm going to finish my time on the stream here. But those of you on the stream, thank you for being a part of the show. Again, to like and share and get some more people to subscribe to this. We could be 900 by next week. If you think this show has any value, then I'm going to stop the K-Talk recording right now and save that under today's date. And then you think the show has any value out there for anybody else, please share this program. Those of you who are on the stream, or those of you listening on through the tower or through the internet with K-Talk. The stream website at YouTube is youtube.com/breaking health barriers. And there's a whole mess of shorts that are there right now. There's a whole mess of podcasts that are there that you can refer to. I just hope that this has had some relevance and some importance for you to be able to share it. Now, I won't be back until next Monday. What a world that's going on out there right now. My goodness. There are some things I would like to say relative to that, but I'm not going to because I don't want to bring politics into this health program. There are people who listen to this health program who don't listen to Monday and Tuesday show because they don't necessarily see things the way I see them politically. So I will keep the health show pure of that. All right, that's going to do it. It's top of the hour. K-Talk should be cutting in with something else here pretty quick. I will see you all Monday. And for those of you on the stream, again, if you'd like and share, I would greatly appreciate it.